Hello, my name is Bruce Counts. I'm the president and CEO of Lithoquest Resources. We're a Canadian-listed exploration company focused on high-grade gold in northwestern Ontario.
Hello, how are you, Bruce?
Very good, thank you.
Well, you're over here in London. You're obviously at the show. You were talking to prospective investors. How's the show going for you?
It's been very good.
Yeah.
It's been very good. We've seen some new people, seen some existing investors as well, so quite well received.
Oh, fantastic. And have you got many European investors? What's the kind of ratio to North American to Europe?
We have quite a few European investors. It's always hard to say exactly how many, but probably at least a third, I would think.
Right.
Are European-based.
What's the mood?
It's been very positive. For us, it's been very positive. We've just captured new projects this year, so the reception's been very good.
Right. Okay. So we've not met before spoken. We're going to keep this fairly, high level today, and hopefully you'll come and join us in the new year. So let's talk about the basis on which you set this company up. What were you planning to do? What's the business plan?
Okay, well, so maybe I should back up and start. When we went public in late 2017, it was actually on a very early stage diamond exploration opportunity in northwestern Australia. Yeah. And we had some technical, Lithoquest diamonds initially. Yeah. We had some technical success. Unfortunately, the economic success didn't come with it. So kimberlites, but no diamonds. Yeah. So in the beginning of 2020, we decided to put those projects on care and maintenance. We put the company basically to ground. And I spent the next 15 months doing a lot of research, looking for the right set of assets for the company. Because one of the things that my investors were looking for were projects that had all the exploration upside remaining, but still had enough sort of historical work that we knew would be in the right area. So some drill holes.
Right. Okay. Go from dimes to gold.
Correct.
What's so special about these projects, and why would someone sell them to you?
Well, they were actually non-core assets to an AIM-listed vehicle. And they'd been sitting in inventory for the better part of 20 years. They hadn't been focused, the company Landor had been focused on its projects elsewhere in Ontario. So these had been sitting there quietly, and I think because there'd been no activity for 20 years, they'd just fallen off everybody's radar screen. So one of the great things about the government of Ontario is that they have a really good website where you can do a lot of research on all the historical information. And in doing so, we found these projects. We realized they were non-core assets to Landor, and so we set about trying to acquire them. But there was enough drilling to know that there was some high-grade gold around. Okay.
So back to the original question, which is, so what's your plan now with these? How do you build a company? How do you create value?
So, in exploration, drilling is how we create value. So we are confident that we are in the right location. These are iron formation hosted gold. There's been enough drilling, as I said, that we know we're in the right place. So really for us, how do we add value? We expand mineralization. It's pretty typical in exploration. You'll see there was a discovery in the 1940s that was made because the rocks outcropped, they're right on shore. Then in the late 1980s, when the gold price popped up, there was another round of exploration, a little bit more drilling, but really drilling in the same area. And then Landor came in the late 90s and did some drilling in the early 2000s, but then quickly got focused elsewhere. Right. And so for us, we look at that and we say, okay, there's good drilling. We know that there's mineralization here, but there's still a lot of opportunity to expand that mineralization. Because we're not looking for 200,000 ounces of gold. We're looking for 2 million plus ounces of gold.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word district in here, right? Sure. And people sometimes bandy that around, without necessarily understanding what it means or being able to communicate what that means. So, but it's just big, right? Correct. So, small company, 8 million market cap. I guess limited funds at this moment. You've got to be really efficient with where you apply those funds. So how does one go about building a story off the back of that?
Right. So we're very technically driven. So what our plan was, once we acquired the properties, is to create a comprehensive and unified database, sort of homogenize the geology. You can probably appreciate with all the successive exploration programs. Geologists call the same rock different things, so it was important to homogenize all that and make sure we had all the historical information. Right. And then, do sort of our homework and some basic exploration to set us up for the greatest amount of drilling success possible in Q1 of 2022. And when we raised money in June to support what we were doing, we were very clear with investors that that was exactly what we were going to do. Do not expect us to take this money and go drilling. because we really want to make sure that we're set up for the greatest amount of success. So very technically driven program.
Well, so put in terms that people can, retail can understand, which is so how many meters, how disparate or far apart are all of these data points, and therefore how much could you possibly understand about what's going on the ground, or what clues were you finding about what's going on?
Sure. Okay, so there's two projects that we're acquiring from Landor, and the most advanced one is called Miminiska. So there are two historical showings. They're separated by about 14 kilometers, and they both had enough drilling to know that we've got good gold endowment. But there's the same.
So it's not just a headline number. It's not like, oh, here's a nice high grade which we can put as a headline. It's it tells you enough that you say, well, actually, I think there's going to be more of that here.
Oh yes, no question.
Right.
No question.
Okay.
Yeah. There's some fantastic high grade drilling, but it's not just one or two holes. There's been enough drilling to know that there's consistently grade and size here.
Right, because you spent 15
15
months chasing the right thing, right? Correct. So you had to settle on something. It wasn't a case of, crikey, this is good enough. It was
no.
Right.
That wouldn't have been acceptable to the investors. They were really their expectation was that we would come back with something with quality that had clear path to growing ounces. It's exploration, so there's no certainty. But if you've got all of the information ahead of you, you can sort of say, look, this has got the best shot I've seen in a long time at making a major discovery.
Tell me a little bit about you, because I do want to come back to that. Tell me a little bit about you. What's the relevant experience to the position you find yourself in now? Because money is relatively expensive at this point in terms of the dilutory every time you raise, right? So you've got to manage that process, manage the messaging into the marketplace, and get on with the business of trying to understand what you've got there, right? So tell us a little bit about what you've done, which is relevant to that.
In terms of my background in exploration?
Yeah.
So a geological engineer specializing in geophysics, have been in the business for 30 years. 10 of those years were technical. Right. I pretty quickly after graduating wound up working for BHP at what would become Canada's first diamond mine.
Right.
And I was there from the very first discovery right through to feasibility, building the mine, and then went to work for the junior, which was called Diamond, had a 29% stake in that same mine. Right. And worked on their international portfolio until the company was bought out. That was about an $800 million transaction. So that for me was sort of set the stage as, the kind of incredible wealth creation that comes through discovery. So that was.
But which bit? Because that's diamonds. We're talking gold now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of managing money in a small junior, that's good. In terms of hunting for gold versus diamonds.
Yep. Well, so part of that experience of going through, particularly with BHP, is I had a great privilege of working with what I call best-in-class technical people. So, at 20 years on the corporate side, it's more about making sure that you're managing the money correctly, that you are negotiating deals correctly, that you're dealing with First Nations or Aboriginal issues in a delicate and respectful way, and then also making sure that you're surrounded by people who are best-in-class technical people. Right. And so that my experience with BHP had introduced me to some of those people.
Right. Working with you now?
Correct.
Who are they?
Probably one of the names that's probably most recognizable is Dr. Rob Carpenter. Rob was the founder of Kaminak, which found the coffee gold deposit in the Yukon and sold ultimately to Goldcorp. Rob actually wrote his PhD on iron formation hosted gold in Nunavut at Meliadine. So it's very topical because that's exactly the kind of deposit we're looking for. The other person who's been a share, and I should also add that Rob's a major shareholder as well. The other,
as in he's put money in, not just been given it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Got it.
He's got his own skin in the game. Okay. And then another person who's been very valuable in terms of advice and guidance is John Williamson. John is the founder of the Metals group of companies. He's probably the most well-known that right now is Benchmark Metals. And John's, for his group of companies, has raised over $100 million. In fact, I think they just announced a $30 million bought deal for Benchmark. So he's not only a very astute geologist, but he also has a great deal of experience in capital markets. So, these are the kinds of people that I have behind me, helping me sort through all of the gold and the data. So
Okay. Now you raised obviously earlier in the year $2.5 million or so. Is that about the number, right?
That's right.
What do you do with that?
So that, as I mentioned, we always intended for that money to be used to bring the company forward to the point of drilling. So it compiled all the information we had. We flew very detailed airborne magnetic survey over the area, and then also the very first LiDAR survey. So the magnetics was as much about finding the iron formation as anything else, but it's also really good for understanding the structural environment, faults, the folds, the shear zones. LiDAR is also very good for that. So it's a complementary data set. Right. It also helps you to find outcrop where you might not have seen it otherwise, because you get such a great digital terrain model. Right. So where you might think that you only had 10% outcrop, you might actually find you have 25% outcrop by just looking at that LiDAR. So obviously very helpful when you're out doing some prospecting and trying to understand.
And how do you take you've obviously inherited a bit of data, because there was a little bit of work had gone on before to help you pick these two projects, right? And then you're going to spend a bit of money yourself, right? And so you've got layers of data, old and new.
Yes.
How do those complement each other in terms of what you thought or what you might have?
Okay, so there's obviously, it confirms the historical information, particularly for the magnetics, absolutely. But also because we did highly detailed surveys, we just get a lot more resolution, if you will, for instance, the iron formations. And then we can do modeling inversions. These are new techniques that really didn't exist in the 80s and they did in the early 2000s, but the software and the refining of the process goes a long way. So that was very helpful. The other thing that we have access to, and we've just pulled this core, is 3,000 meters of core that Landor had in their yard in Thunder Bay. So you can read all the reports you want. There's nothing like actually going through the rock. So we're able to pull that core into our own facility, and we're relogging it and looking at how the style of mineralization. What do we need? What tools do we need to identify where that mineralization is?
Fantastic, 3,000 meters. Oh, right. And so there were old reports and analysis on that, but you're saying, do you know what? It's better now. Yes, more likely to give us a different set of results. Yeah.
Well, and just eyes on the rocks. Have you done that yet? Right? We're in the process of doing that. Just before coming here, we had all the core in a new facility, and we had just started the logging. So, a couple of things really stand out for us. Yeah. First of all, the gold is completely associated with sulfide. And where there's no sulfide, there's no gold. But equally important, there's no places that we could identify where there was sulfide without gold.
Right.
So the next step for us, after having flown the mag and the LiDAR, and also going out into the field, in October we went into the field, did some prospecting, we did soil sampling, and we also did biogeochemical sampling. So sampling bark. In this part of Ontario, it's not uncommon to see very poor soil development in areas. Yeah. So what do you do when you've got poor soil? You can't collect soil samples, and there's no outcrop. So there's a professor at Lakehead University, which is in Thunder Bay, who's done a lot of work on biogeochemical sampling. He's helped us set up our protocols. He's given us our standards. And so we did a sort of a calibration survey over an area where we knew we had gold in soil, and then used that elsewhere on the property. So the idea is that would give us an edge in places where you don't have good soil development. So after having done that, we then pulled this core out. Having looked and seen the sulfides are really associated with the gold. So now we want an EM survey, because there's been very little EM done on any of these projects. The government did a sort of a regional EM survey, but it doesn't give us the resolution we want. But what we realize now is, because we've got these great conductors in the sulfides, that if you have coincident conductivity and magnetics, drill there.
Right, and so you're surrounded by a lot of other operators, right? So you've got some clues as to what this greenstone belt is typically giving up.
Correct.
So, just explain that, because investors want to know what they're investing into and what it could be, and therefore how to value it. We're open pit, are we underground? What sort of grades?
Yeah, so I guess the analog for us would be Musselwhite. Musselwhite's about 150 kilometers to the northwest. It's iron formation hosted gold. It's over 6 million ounces, underground mine. It's owned by Newmont, and as I understand, it's one of Newmont's most profitable mines. So that's, if we're looking for something, we're looking for multi-million ounce deposits that would be fairly high grade. A grade of 5 to 6 ounces or grams per ton.
So that's what chasing, because greenstone people think is usually a little bit lower on average.
Sure. Yeah.
But the underground is giving up a bit more.
So Musselwhite being the example, that's sort of the holy grail in the area where we are.
But is it typical? And it's the holy grail, but is it typical? And that's one example.
It's not uncommon. It's not uncommon in these iron formation hosted gold deposits to have quite high grade. If you look at Meliodine and Lupin, for instance, two other high grade iron formation hosted gold. So no, it's not atypical of that kind of deposit to have high grade like that.
Okay, I guess you'll see. Because I think where you're at the moment, you're kind of in that kind of black magic, black art stage where it's pre-drilling, where people don't quite understand the LiDAR or the geo mapping, etc. And it's layering all of this data on to give you some targets to go after.
Correct. Correct.
Again, to be the most efficient you can be with the drilling process. So you're going to need to raise some money when you get in that drill phase. So when's that going to be?
Right. So the whole plan was, as I mentioned, we told the investors we're not going to be drilling, but they did say, look, go about, do your homework, come back to us when you're finished, show us what you've got, the targets you have, and if they warrant more drilling and more money, then we'll be happy to put money on the table. So we've got some lead orders, provided that we can demonstrate that there's worthy targets, and so we're in the process of doing that. We expect we'll raise money probably early in the new year to support the drilling program.
Right, and is that going to come from the existing show? Because you've kind of got the Crux cats and the plethora and the Rossos, of this world in there. So are they the guys who are going to stump up the cash?
Yes. Yeah, certainly they'll be a part of the financing.
I'm just trying to work out what type of financing it would be, because obviously you've got 42% retail in there.
I actually think that's probably an overestimation of the amount of retail, because with a lot of family offices and high net worth individuals that we don't know how many shares they hold. But if you look at the way we trade, we don't trade very frequently. We don't trade like we have a lot of retail in our stock.
Better update your PowerPoint then.
But you can't really tell exactly how much is held by family offices and high net worth investors. So we pegged it at where we did because, look, it could be retail. This is the other 53%. We know where that is. We're confident in those hands. But so we say it's 47% retail.
Okay, so it's fairly standard raised when at the point you want to go there. You're raising little chunks of money, so you're obviously conscious of dilution.
Very conscious. Absolutely.
Right. Okay, but if you go do drilling, you would expect to, and typically in a program like this, you'd be doing what, 3,000 meters, 5,000
meters would be the minimum that we'd like to see, and 5 to 10,000 meters is sort of ideal. The idea being that we'd want to spend sort of 75 to 80% of that drilling budget on the showings that we understand and where there has been drilling. So we know that there's gold there, and we feel like we can grow mineralization in ounces there. But when you mentioned district scale, one of the things we want to do is develop a pipeline of targets. So, if you're drilling on target A and it doesn't really work out, you have target B, C, D that you can continue to chase.
Chase that discovery.
Absolutely. One drill hole away.
Always one drill hole away. Bruce, thanks for the summry. Thanks for coming in here. Appreciate you making time, because I know you're busy across the road meeting shareholders and potential investors. So let's catch up in the new year when things have moved on and when you're at that point of making a decision around drilling and timing.
Yeah, and I think we'll be able to demonstrate, we'll have that geological model that we're building on where the existing drilling is. We'll be able to show the market that we have some very compelling targets, I believe.
Beautiful.
Excellent. Thank you.